Lynn McDonald, and I'll be the river guide for this wonderful session and for this series of events. We'll just let the last few folks come in, and then we want to start with an acknowledgement of land and waters. All right, so as I said, I'm the river guide, and in recognition of water, I'm holding up a beautiful glass of water, and which unites us on the planet. Let's begin by recognizing that many of us live and work on the traditional lands and waters of Indigenous peoples. We are grateful for their stewardship and the participation of many Indigenous practitioners, authors, facilitators, and presenters in systemic design. I'll drop into the chat in a moment a source for more information and an extraordinary map about the lands on the planet where you can see sort of the original sort of Indigenous peoples that lived there. So I am thrilled to welcome you to a very special lineup in the program. It's a mini symposium by the Flourishing Enterprise Institute. There's a series of 4 sessions this morning. The first 3 are directly associated with the Flourishing Enterprise Institute. You'll learn more about the Institute as we go. And we kick things off with a fireside chat session in a conversation between John Ehrenfeld and Dr. Peter Jones, both of whom I'll introduce in a moment. The second session will dive into the mission and the focus and the community of practice that is the Flourishing Enterprise Institute. And a workshop on context-based sustainability will follow that. And concurrent with the last, but starting a little bit later, is the there's an intriguing topic of multi-species design. So it's a banquet on a boat in the river. But we do sometimes change boats in order to allow recordings to be, singular and modular. But we're hoping that you'll follow us along. Before the end of each segment, close to the top of the hour, in this coming case, I will step in to create pause and space for people to leave for the lobby and switch to the next session if they desire. Or you can stay and chat in a still open room. And we were just saying a moment ago, it's like, in a conference, the speakers are at the front of the room and you go up and you have a few extra words with them. So we have that capacity here. As your river guide, I'll be watching the chat along with Morgan Bath, who is here on the call. She works with FEI, and if you have a question for the presenters, please put them in the chat. I'll share with the presenters if and when they pause. This first session, though, which is precious time with John and Peter. I know Peter has many deep questions for John, so I'm sure that they'll be able to go for some time. We'll see how we do on time, but please enjoy. And please mute yourself, of course, unless you're speaking directly. So let's begin. So the first session is entitled, How Can We Meet John Ehrenfeld's Challenge to Flourish? We're so pleased and honored to have John R. Ehrenfeld with us. John has had an illustrious career in the environmental field, including as executive director of the International Society for Industrial Ecology, and today is the author and true inspiration for many of us. Both the World Resources Institute and the Academy of Management's Organization and Natural Environment Division have honored him for his achievements. John continues to research, write, and teach. He holds a BS and Science, Doctorate of Science in Chemical Engineering from MIT, is an author or co-author of over 200 papers, books, reports, and other publications. And I showed him the book I have here just a few moments ago. Thank you for joining us, John. You are a rock star here. And Dr. Peter Jones is Distinguished Professor of Systemic Design at Tecnológico de Monterrey, Mexico. He is an Associate Professor at Toronto's OCAD University, teaches in the graduate design programs there. Peter is a co-founder and vice chair of the Systemic Design Association and is editor-in-chief of its new journal, Context. Peter is the academic director of the Flourishing Enterprise Institute and was a founder. I share that I've always appreciated Peter's generous sharing of resources and joining of dots that he does wherever he goes. He too is an inspiration. So I'll turn it over to Peter now for an extraordinary conversation. We're so pleased to be able to listen in. Peter.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, John, for joining us at RSDX Online as part of the RSD 13 program this year. One thing I'd like to add to that for the participants or for people that are joining us and are listening, the main part of this is set up as a chat or a dialogue with John, and you may have questions and you may have burning questions as well. I would suggest putting questions that arise in the chat, and Lynn will ensure that we have some time before we close to come to some of those questions. John and I can stay over a little bit, as Lynn had suggested, and then Lynn will be transitioning to the next session. So let me introduce kind of the framing for my kind of framing, if you will, for the introduction of Dr. John Ehrenfeld's what we call Challenge to Flourish. But as some of you may know, and those that have participated in the Flourishing Enterprise Institute before and are joining us today, but maybe new people as well that are to anchor up front that the FEI and work that we've done for the last more than 10 years, almost 15 years, in the flourishing business model, as it's known, draws on its theory of flourishing from John Ehrenfeld's work. Before then, we were calling it the strongly sustainable business model and trying to find a better way to position it. And it just kind of hit us like a ton of bricks that this is really what we're talking about. Flourishing describes the condition of any living system in which individual entities have achieved their potential, and as we like to say from John's definition, that where life on earth can flourish for many generations, if not forever. John proposes that we define sustainability in terms of sustaining flourishing, that is, sustaining what we want, not as sustainable development. I also like to introduce, our interest within FEI is on enterprises and organizations and transforming them as our kind of theory of change for impact, for flourishing. And in one of our cafe sessions, our Community for Flourishing Enterprise, earlier this year with John, we had discussed and just started to introduce the language of this new systemic management frame, systemic management innovation, and the FEI has developed an entire category now with this concept, which is undergoing study. And John suggested this category sounds like control-based management tools and innovations, as there's this long history ranging, as he writes, from TQM to re-engineering, from value engineering and digital transformation. And that's right. These have, and he rightly critiques that this kind of left brain managerial control mindset would not enable flourishing, but would sustain business as usual. And that's perhaps a risk with developing tools that help structure new activities and organizations that we believe are going to have a potential for, leading toward flourishing, if you will, to this theory of change, this impact. And the strategic management or systemic management innovation is a new category. So we don't want to start by making a category error right at the start that leads us in the wrong direction. So we want to say, this is kind of in the background and for us, but this is part of, we think part of our organizational learning process and an important concept to consider. So Tim Posselt will actually speak about systemic management innovations in the next session, in this track. So I'll have start with some questions for John, but I did want to just say that to give a little bit of introduction to some of his latest work or writing, but to bring it forward from the last time we had Dr. Ehrenfeld speaking at RSD, at least as a keynote, was at RSD 6. And here we are at 13, and our symposium theme then was Flourishing Together. And now, so then 8 years ago, we might have been calling out then some of the social breakdowns that we could see emerging that are happening. But we want to go, we want to see where we want to take stock now of what we can do, given that we've been working with these ideas for all this time, and that the FEI, our research institute, conveys this theory that flourishing will grow both out and inwardly from organizations. It's called middle up down, but that we can impact people and their participation within the workplace in their lives, but also the purpose of the organization itself. So I want to start with some questions around, just to open up with a broader kind of the change in concept of flourishing, how it's being received, and ask you, John, we've adapted your definition of flourishing as expressed, in business models, in the research that we're doing in the FEI. But you had talked in RSD 6 then about designing a brave new world based on Ian McGilchrist's cognitive science and the kind of the bicameral brain hypothesis. And how has your thinking developed on the meaning of flourishing since then? Can you say how your definition or how you explain flourishing has changed over this time?
Well, I think it's since since that event, I don't think it's changed a lot. Before that event, it changed a lot. I mean, actually, I'm almost embarrassed to to tell the story, because being an academic and looking at these issues as very intellectual, flourishing didn't start that way. I was doing some training. I was actually doing some personal training at which the graduation ceremony was that everybody in the room got up and went up to the front and one by one said, "I'm the possibility that, there'll be peace in the world, my family will prosper," and so forth. I got up and walked to the front of the room and said, "I'm the possibility that humans in other life will flourish on the planet forever." So really the origin of this is kind of magic, and but I knew at that point that was really meaningful. And so for this is now probably 30 years later, flourishing's gone an increasingly more, I'd say, soundly based path, at least in my thinking. In the first book I wrote, Sustainability by Design, I really didn't have a lot to say. I thought I began to, I think, write that flourishing was associated with care. That it was, I think my inspiration largely was probably Heidegger's notions of being, and the sense that there were several forms of being, authentic and inauthentic, and that flourishing lined up with the authentic. And then, as you said, oh gosh, now 10, 12 years ago, I came upon the work of Ian McGilchrist. McGilchrist has argued that each hemisphere of the brain attends to the world differently and presents a different world. And in essence, we're like fraternal twins, each one of us acting in two distinct moods. Around the same time, I read a book by an American philosopher named CWRU, who argued that viability, but basically what I would call flourishing, had two axes. Personal wholeness, that's the sort of autonomous, unique individual each of us are, and social coherence. That's to recognize that we are social creatures and live within a culture that's full of interactions with other human beings. Well, lo and behold, each of these sides of flourishing lines up almost perfectly with the way that Ian McGilchrist argues the brain works. But further, that the modern cultures that we all live in, and anybody who's attending this a discussion this morning, are strongly left brain. We seek control. We seek certainty. We act out of a world we store in the left side of our brain that's partial. It's made up of our beliefs and all the parts. But the real world is the one we connect to is the right brain. That's our empathetic brain. That's the one that cares. That's the one that's really important. And that's the one that's been missing in a sense of why we're in such bad place today. Because I believe that unsustainability, this combination of all these bads, climate change, ocean pollution, social inequity, bad mental pathology increasing in the world, are all importantly unintended consequences of normal cultural behavior. And that's because, as McGilchrist argues, we're in a left brain culture. We're operating out of a partial view of the world. And it isn't surprising that if we don't really fit reality, things that are unintended are going to just appear and grow. And the further we're away from that, the worse they're going to get. So sustainability, it fits very well. And the two bi-hemisphere model offers a design framework sort of to take the first steps to get us back to a flourishing world. So maybe that's a broad background of the sort of where this comes from.
Thank you. I think that picks us up really well from the last RSD, and also in the way that we're exploring that's what I call it, really a challenge for flourishing because of what the definition of flourishing is in the future and as a place to get to means that we're always progressing, but we may not actually get there very soon, but we can perhaps measure in some way, maybe not in too technocratic a way, but to discover our ways of new ways of progressing towards flourishing as opposed to sustaining development, if you will. Now, I'd like to mention your latest article, or at least it's 2024, in Journal of Management, Spirituality, and Religion, actually, To Reach Flourishing, Turn Right Sharply at the Next Corner, which is a play on this turning right toward the hemisphere. And there's a quote that I like in the paper that kind of ties into the enterprise concern that we have, like how can we work with people in groups and whether they're cities or companies or in NGOs and small groups, change groups. So this quote, given the predominant shift of business in the political economy, firms would have and the major role in effectuating this shift. The ubiquitous hubristic belief that one can predict how intentions will turn out, a left hemisphere process, is itself part of the cause of the current mess. And you advocate a pragmatism that is, I take that as kind of from the original, the sense of pragmatically doing what works for activities that let the right hemisphere do the lion's share of the work, must lead the charge. And so we would agree with this pragmatist approach, both, I think, from a systems perspective, because so much of kind of the systems thinking has a grounding in pragmatism, especially with design, because it's less theoretical. It's about how to design this way. But I think ideology, and also the ideology is not a way to win over the corporate world. So I think you're right, and it's like for organizations, we have to be pragmatic. And can you say more about thoughts on how organizations or leadership perhaps, and those who have the ability to change ideas and to lead in different ways, we might change in this direction pragmatically. What does that mean for people that can speak to the to leadership situations?
Well, it means they sort of have to throw away everything they knew and begin over again. I mean, it's a big deal. The bihemispheric brain model is the epitome of a paradigm. I mean, it is at the heart of what Thomas Kuhn would have called a paradigm. It's a way of framing reality that is sort of non-connected logically to the past, and it has these wonderful properties of unscrambling puzzles that have been refractory and offering a way of thinking to move forward. So the first thing that leaders have to do, or anybody, is sort of acknowledge that they're going to start thinking about the world in a different way. That's really hard to do. I don't think that many people are able to do that. That's why the conclusion of that paper you cited is one that sort of says, let's just close the business schools and start over to develop folks who know how to think properly. That's pragmatically. This is all about systems. This conference is about systems. This is about and systems, not just any old system, but many, at least including the idea of complexity, systems that are complex, systems that are unpredictable, fundamentally unpredictable. And that's where we are, the global Earth system. The world of a business is complex. Even though leaders like to think that they know what they're doing and what's going to happen the next day, there's always room for surprises, naturally. Flourishing takes definitively requires that you think about complexity, because flourishing is emergent. You know, it's not measurable. I would argue you can't measure it. It's either there or it isn't. You can detect it, you know the signs, but the minute you try to put a metric, quantitative metric, well, you've probably lost the game. Now, you're going to have leaders are going to have to buy this, not a little bit, but 100%. They're going to have to acknowledge that they're going to work from a different model, and that they're not always going to be right, and that the way you really move forward is make mistakes. I mean, if you're lucky enough to hit the answer, if you could solve the problem of climate change in one fell swoop, you'd be very lucky. But more likely, we're going to have to do it bit by bit. Same with businesses, same with business leaders. The first thing is to recognize that their company is embedded in a complex world, and that you know, if they're trying to build a better car, they want more miles per gallon, they want to be snazzier than their competitors, that's just fine. They can live with what they learned in business schools, and their engineers can live with what they learn in engineering schools. But if you really want to take on issues like sustainability, or its major components, climate change, say, you have to accept first that it's a systemic problem, the heart and soul of what you guys do, and that you can do something, and you should do something that lines up with the right kind of thing, but that you can't solve these big problems by yourselves. So you might as well focus at the roots, and then, you know, start to contribute to the flourishing of the human beings that you can influence, those who you employ, those whom you serve, those whom are stakeholders by the virtue that you affect their lives. And you can do that by beginning to contribute to a shift from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. I mean, this is my arguments. This is the gist of what I've been writing.
Now, have you observed any kinds of effective practices that leaders can use to start changing the conversation with those around them? I mean, that happened with you coming out of kind of the vision for the possibility for flourishing, if you will. Would you suggest that, these types of possibilities could be raised within, like the management team, for example, from a leader who gets this? Or would it be more like just talking with people in everyday terms to soften up the potential, as to try to change the way conversations are happening in the company around how their work connects to, caring about the community, the society, the ecology, and these kinds of things? What are the kind of conversations that that leaders could consider? I mean, there's probably no like book of aphorisms or something like that, but there is work that's close to this, though. If you know Peter Block's work on working with small groups, that I think appeals to this kind of a lateral conversation with people in smaller groups where they feel safe to really take on a change of mind.
Oh, well, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Russ Acuff, but he's done exactly what you say. His book is full of, one of his books is nothing but aphorisms. And I'd say they're not all directed toward, working with complexity, but many of them are. So he's way ahead of us on that tack. Oh, there are things. I think there are lots of things businesses do, and some of them are already doing them. One is to shift a mindset that is I'd say it can be traced back to the way that the left brain works, and that is to stop thinking of people as commodities. We're human beings, but that left brain doesn't see that. The left brain just sees a thing out there that has certain characteristics, is useful or not, and works with it. That's the way it is. It's the right brain that is empathetic and connects. And unfortunately, in, I'd say, 3 generations, businesses have gone from sort of being families of people to being machines, efficient machines. The focus on efficiency, which is so central to business schools and management training, can't do that. That's a left brain notion. So you can do something about that. And businesses can actually employ methods that get you out of the routine. In the first book I wrote, I'd just been in Europe for a while, and Europe, as you know, is often taken different design theories and approaches than here in the States. And one of them is the whole idea of behavior steering designs, speed bumps. Speed bump is a design that it's designed to change your behavior, to stop you from driving and slow down and look around. And the thing that got me on that, and I've written a lot about it, it's a simple thing, is it's 2-button toilet. I had never seen one of these till I got to Europe. Oh, 2-button toilet's a wonderful example of a behavior steering device. It gets you out of your sort of routine to think, what the hell is going on here? I'm not a designer.
That's a good design. That's a really good design feature, because it is a reminder that you can use less water for the function. It's a different type of optimization. It's not efficiency. It is conservation. if you would.
It puts you in the world. You face the real world, and the real world water is an issue. And if you would, these devices cause breakdowns. This is, the existentialist notion of breakdown. They break the routine. So do questions. It's interesting. Question just stops the action, brings the world to you. Businesses can introduce these kind of practices to sort of make sure that there's some humanity that can come forth in their businesses. Simple, doesn't cost anything. It does. I'm sorry, it does cost anything. It's going to make you less efficient. But you have this choice. Managers have this choice that they can play the game of efficiency, profit, GDP, wealth, or they can play the game of flourishing. It's a different game. You can't, you may be able to figure it out so that you can have both. I don't know if that's possible. I'm not going to even hazard a guess. But it's a different game. And you ask, what can managers do? They have to decide which game they're in. And it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. There are other practices that business can do that are, I think, win-win. Mindfulness training is one which has a life in business. There are a number of studies now that show that introducing mindfulness into business as a practice can increase productivity, but it also puts you in the right brain. Mindfulness works by quieting the left.
But is it in the service of left brain activities? There's also,
that's okay.
Yeah. But then there's I would mention the presencing approach from Otto Scharmer, another MIT alumnus, if I would, and I think in the presencing model, there's also there's a way of trying to integrate or holistic activities within organizations that can bring to mind, this a more balanced approach, and to actually change the organization in a way that can use this collaborative approach in like presencing together. And the presencing is similar, I think, to how you're seeing the right brain, kind of breaking through with the right brain as a way to flourish in consciousness, but also to introduce, more awareness in the organization itself, so that people are aware of how the organization functions as a type of living system, if you will, or as a system that we're contributing to.
Yeah, it brings forth a much better sense of place, of where you are, of the whole system that you're in, and that's really very important. For two reasons. One is that if you're interested in things like quality, I'll get back to that in a minute, or flourishing, both of which are emergent properties, then you have to be aware you're in a system. If you're going to try to get from here to there, where here is not doing it and there is. And there was what else? Oh, and another is that these are forms of I think a woman named Emery Willis wrote a wonderful paper on ontological design. That these are design methods in which you're designing a world, but the world is turning back and designing you. So they are affecting the kind of human being you are. Over time, if you're working in an environment that continues to wake you up and to strengthen that right brain, you're going to become a different person when you walk out of the door and go home, or go to the voting booth, or go to a community center, or whatever it is. And so we don't really understand that this wonderful magical property of emergence. And the one company I know does, and they're very famous for it, and that's Toyota. Toyota production system is an exemplar of a right brain pragmatic system to produce quality. And it's one that uses this tool of breakdowns. When something goes wrong on the Toyota production system line, the worker pulls a cord and stops production, causes a breakdown, reduces the efficiency, does everything that you're not supposed to do. And then the folks—
And that can be for anything that they perceive as a quality issue, not just a list of certain flaws to look for. But it's really perception based, isn't it? It's like, I believe this is a quality issue.
It is. And then they convene a quality circle of people who are not necessarily the designer of the assembly line, but the people who have had an opportunity to observe, to be connected, right brain. And then they sit and they ask this wonderful mantra, 5 whys. Why did this happen? Well, you're going to say, well, there was nothing in the bin of parts. Well, why was there nothing in the bin of parts? Oh, well, maybe the blah, 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 blah. And why did that happen? And after they've asked why as many as 5 times, they probably got to the root cause. And that's a pragmatic approach. It's not theory. And so they try this, and it works. It is the most effective system for manufacturing cars in the world. Mercedes, one comment, Mercedes, at the time that this was being studied at MIT, took as many hours to fix a car at the end of the assembly line that Toyota took to make the car in the first place. Remarkable, pragmatic,
yes,
right brain system. So it works.
No, the Mercedes was engineered to be perfect from the blueprint, and the Toyota was incrementally improved until it became perfect through its production.
Right.
It's more of a design process. Now, I'm old enough to remember, but you probably also very well remember when the quality circles were introduced into American industry. I remember actually going to GE jet engines in Cincinnati for the very first quality circles that were being held there. They actually opened them up to people in other professional societies to learn about the introduction of quality circles. And it was right brain. Like, I mean, I remember that like it was, this is something new. There's something different here in the organization. It's bottom up. People are working together, collaborating, and having very different conversations than the other companies that I was familiar with. It started to change things. And I don't think that it has that impact anymore. They, of course, left-brained it and optimized quality so that it becomes, part of the industrial system, if you will. They turned it into the machine in a lot of places. It's no longer novel. Is there a sense though where this is kind of where I'm getting to about like with even flourishing though, could there be like the equivalent of a flourishing circle, like the change in collaboration, the change in the organization that the quality circles introduced? And I think this is where I come from with the systemic management innovations, is that my memory of how the quality movement was introduced, that it really did have a breakthrough effect throughout the 1980s. And there was an excitement. I mean, there were new things you could now do in business. I introduced usability testing into a number of companies during the 80s. I learned it from IBM, and it was kind of like, a different way of doing design. And that opened up a lot of other, it became more possible to do other things. and it seems like we've lost that edge in a lot of companies. And now, I would say even with AI now being used more and more, that has the potential to optimize, like give me the right answer. And there's another meaning of ontological design, which was Fernando Flores and Terry Winograd, who wrote Understanding Computers and Cognition. And they used Heidegger's,
Right.
the same kind of model of breakdown that we were just talking about. And they use ontology to argue that AI will never do human practices because it can't recognize this kind of perception of quality, this perception of the breakdown.
Yeah, I agree. I owe in many ways, I owe the idea of flourishing to Flores. I took some courses from him over a number of years, and it's really the kind of approach out of which this idea came. So it very much can be traced back to Flores and Winograd, but particularly Flores. Well, again, you have, let's say you look at a company, you look at the way it's organized, very hierarchical. You have a management which is increasingly financially oriented because that's how business schools run. And they are forever looking for efficiency. This notion never took hold. There was this initial sort of burst. Much of it came out after the publication of a book by my colleagues at MIT, actually my suite mates at MIT, The Machine That Changed the World, which really introduced the Toyota production system into the US. There was a lot of interest. Lean Enterprise Institute, my friend Jim Womack ran till he retired, was that. But it's never really,
alpha chip?
it's really never taken hold. The origins are very different. The Toyota system was basically Mr. Toyota's baby. It was for many years really run by a family, and this was their idea. I don't know if it can even, I don't know, given the way the world is, whether it can last a Toyota forever until it gets taken over by a set of financial interests. This model is inconsistent with the basic notion of complexity emergence, and without, as long as that's setting the institutional framework, this stuff isn't going to happen. So it is really, yes, can they do it? Of course they can do it. Although that's, I may be just too glib an answer. Maybe they can't do it. That if you see the world as a machine, then this comes along, it comes in, it goes out. So I think it's. I mean, personally, I've watched my own work and how it's going. You're one of my probably 25 fans, and so I've been very disappointed in this, and I can understand in many ways why. Some of it has to do with that, I'm 90 some years old. I don't have the energy and what the hell to get out and push it anymore. But these are really different ideas. Paradigms are chewed up and spit out by the existing institution. They threaten the power structure. And so this is a epitome paradigm. But
yeah, and that's
like, you can keep trying, but I think it's understandable. I don't think that once people begin to really start to think about complexity and system as the where you have to look at the whole thing, you can't just play with the parts. I don't think that's hard. There's MIT, lots of folks there who understand that. Most of them don't. But you have people like Otto and Peter Senge who really get it. That this is a systemic problem, that the interesting things in life are emergent. Life itself is emergent. Life's a miracle. Life, what happened? We emerged from however blah 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 the cosmos. So, but every in a world that everything is quantified and commoditized, it's really hard to introduce and practice these ideas. So I mean, that's why even at my advanced age, I'll grab an opportunity to spend an hour with you, Peter, just to talk.
Thanks. I mean, yeah.
I'm
And I'd like,
wondering actually if we could maybe see if anybody in the audience wants to frame a question for John and Peter. We have certainly time for at least two. So is anybody interested in raising their hand to ask a question in our final moments here?
thanks, Len. Yeah, I'd encourage that. I hope that it opened up some intrigue from people listening in.
All right, Brett, please.
What do we got?
Yeah, so something that occurred to me as you were wrapping up, coming to the end, and I put this in the chat, it reminded me of James Karsh's book, Finite and Infinite Games, right? And the finite game is one that's played by rules, sports, whatever. Infinite games is something where, kind of like what you're talking about, the Toyota production system, and that's what made me think of it, is the whole purpose of that was to make it so that you could continue to play and to flourish, basically, to go. And so I don't know if you've thought about it in that context or not. I know our current system in business is encourages and incentivizes that managers play the game as a finite game, right? To win. They play within the rules and do the best they can. And what it sounds like you're proposing, and I'm a proponent of it, is adjusting the system to incentivize, encourage an approach that's more of an infinite game, where we're trying to make it so that we can just keep playing and that everyone can play to the extent that they want.
It's very good, a terrific reference. I mean, we all play. We're all playing. The most important game we're playing is an infant game. It's called life. We're playing life until things happen, until we find our dreams, until we begin to flourish. It doesn't come out. It's not an end product. It's a product that emerges from playing the game. So it's a very nice analogy, I think, to help understand the difference between emergent qualities like flourishing, which is the result of whatever game the organization is playing. Whatever is going on has to be played by a set of rules, a set of processes that enables this possibility called flourishing to come forth, or whatever the purpose of the game is. It's a result of the process ongoingly. So that's a nice, I'm going to remember that one. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, I love Karsh's book. That was actually important in my PhD because it helped me think of the other way of making arguments, that you could take this very long-term point of view. And what I'd like to tie into the flourishing conversation, Brett, is that, and I was going to actually just say this before I opened up to questions, but it's that there have been real breakthrough business thinkers and leaders, and John had mentioned also Russell Ackoff, Peter Senge, Otto Scharmer. I'd also say Harvard's Shoshana Zuboff was another one.
Yes.
And she kind of famously dropped off from Harvard while she still had a lot to say. And she hints at this in her work, and she came back with the support economy. But if you look at her work, kind of her through line, she really did try to change the way, move from business as usual. And what happens in the infinite game is you change, and you might end up leaving, the playing field because you've changed to such an extent, and what you have to say is now bigger than, the organizations that you're trying to change, and you hope that somebody listens. Kind of where John was just saying he is right now. When you leave the institution, sometimes you're able to say things that, can have a lot of impact because you're not constrained by those, it's everyday finite game. So how do we stay in the finite game and change it with the infinite?
Thank you, Brett. That's a beautiful question. Yeah.
Thank
We are at 11:51. This is the time where we start closing up but is there anyone who's sitting on a question or comment that they would like to get in before we start transitioning? Anyone?
Oh, everybody gets it.
Aha.
I don't get it. I have a question. Yeah, say hello. But people don't have to stay for it. It's a bit of a sort of my question. So if anybody has like a really sort of relevant general question, please, I'm just going to count to 3 in case somebody wants to jump in.
What I will do in the meantime is I'm going to go to the other room and start the process of opening it there for the next session. We have Flourishing Enterprise Institute coming up at the top of the hour, so we hope that you join us. So we'll be there for another fantastic conversation. And John and Peter, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us. It's just fabulous. I meant it. You both are rock stars, so it's just such a pleasure to hear you in conversation, and I'll let that the conversation continue. So see you in the next session.
Thank you, Lynn. Thanks.
Yeah, Peter, you're gonna go into the next session, right?
Oh, only after we're done. Yeah, so there might be a couple more questions. Looks like Cheryl?
I can stay, so I'm not running.
Yeah, some of this, I don't think the next one really starts until the top of the hour, so we still have a few minutes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So Cheryl, Akash has a question. Akash, would you like to ask John directly?
Yeah.
Hi, John. It's Akash over here. So I had this question about when you were speaking about emergence. So I had this question where who defines the rule and processes of this game in the field of life, where the landscape of life is anarchist in its essence? Is emergence an anarchist process which could be made sense only after it takes place?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by an anarchist. Yeah, I guess a process that undoes the system when it shows up. It's just the opposite. I'd say that flourishing, when it begins to come, reinforces the system, because I think people who flourish know that they're flourishing. There are those who've defined flourishing by the kind of things that show up. The ideas of flow, of just joy, of connectedness. If you're living a life that's full of that, I think you want the life to continue. It's absolutely the opposite of sort of saying, oh my God, now I see things and I want them to go away. So that's how I would interpret your notion of an anarchistic process. So it's a good thing. It's going to have positive feedback. People who flourish are going to tell their friends. People who flourish are going to tell their bosses. Enjoy, you enjoy life. Life is fine. I believe I've been flourishing for probably the last 40 years in my second marriage. And I don't want it to go away. I don't want it to break down. I don't see it as, I see it as an example of the possibility there is. That's, yeah.
That's the sustainment, isn't it, then? That's also what you're
Yeah.
sustaining.
Yeah.
That changes how we think of, what is it, what's sustainability then? It's this
Well,
sustaining that flow.
Sustainability is the possibility that something you want continues to come forth. And in this case, it's flourishing. It can be, sustainability doesn't have to be defined this way, but it can be defined in terms of other qualities, the quality of life. If you look at the world, an ecosystem, the sustainability is a possibility that will continue to exist because it doesn't have a culture. It doesn't have an existential aspect that humans do. So sustainability would mean something else when you apply it to a living, say, ecosystem. It's simply the possibility that all the good things about it continue on and on into the future. But you have to have some reference, or it doesn't mean anything. Sustainable as an adjective points to the noun. It's always focused on what's going on in the noun. Sustainable business, it's all about growing. I mean, whether you write organizational mission statements that say otherwise, sustainable business is fundamentally all about becoming bigger but there are something like 50 sustainable living, sustainable luggage, sustainable thinking. You can look on the web and see sustainable as an adjective, 50 different places.
Thanks. Cheryl, did you want to ask your question?
Yes. Hi. John, I'm so refreshed to hear you talking about Ian McGilchrist, because he,
I'm sorry, say that again, Cheryl.
Ian McGilchrist, the Master and His Emissary.
Oh, yes.
You're mostly, I know there's several others, but it's that's a book on my playlist. Like, I no longer really listen to music, but I will repeat play that book, certain like chunks of it. So, but I haven't had much pickup on conversation around around McGilchrist or around this topic that you're raising. And one thing I just want to ask is, like, is it legitimate work? Because the way I found it was during the whole Jordan Peterson sort of media storm. He said, this is the only book anyone should ever read if they only read one book. And I thought that kind of catches my attention sometimes. So I stumbled into it through this kind of, what is now considered a fairly reactionary backdoor. So I'm always like sort of cautious about bringing it forward. And I just wondered where you are on it, because it's just not come up and I just can't get any conversation on this going at this kind of scholarly level. So I just wondered if it was not scholarly.
Well, I got introduced it the same way. I sent a draft of this last book to my publisher, who rejected it and said, but I got this consolation prize. I'm sending you a couple books from our catalog. And she sent me the first book. I picked it up and I never put it down. No, McGilchrist is again, I'll go back to this idea, it's paradigmatic. People, it forces you into a sort of putting aside all the things you've learned. And if you're an academic, particularly, that's really hard, because you're part of a discipline which is grounded on a set of its own beliefs. And this thing puts the lie to a whole lot of belief structures, almost all. And it's anti-Cartesian. It doesn't work. It's not, the mind doesn't mirror. Half the mind has a partial mirror, but most of academics doesn't take into account that right side of the brain, the whole system part. Reductionism is the name of science. Science is reductionist fundamentally at the core. And so it's very difficult. I don't know why I bought it. Part of it was it seemed to line up with where I was thinking about flourishing and the idea of emergence. Emergence is consistent with the sort of right brain notion. It's inconsistent with the whole idea of the left. So, and McGilchrist is not being accepted by the scientific community because this book is not a scientific treatise. This book is I'd say an enormously successful practice of pragmatic thinking. He's taken just about every bit of data that's available on brains that have one side or the other disabled in one way. And he's drawn from that these inductive or abductive conclusions. But scientists, it's not science. And so the scientific community is very, very slow to accept it. So but those who buy it, like me and these others, we really buy it because it has unscrambled all these puzzles I've been spending my life playing with. Very, very important piece.
Thanks for that. It's helpful because I've kind of struggled. I feel like I'm secretly reading it.
You just got to buy it if it works for you. I mean, if it starts to explain things, then that's the power of a paradigm. It solves puzzles and it lets you move forward. So this whole idea, how do we fix the world? How do we fix a modern culture? Nobody knows. Nobody with a left brain has any idea of how to fix it. They want to fix it bit by bit with technology here, policy there. But you can't fix it that way. You got to go back to its root causes. You have to fix the way that we see the world. The structurationists, Giddens and his sociological models, I believe are very, very much consistent with McGilchrist. And they say, we just reinforce this. The more we think about the world the same way, the more the institutions are based on the way we think about the world. The more we think about the world in the same way, the more the institutions, blah, 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 blah. You can't fix it. You can't fix global warming by putting parasols in space. It's a cultural thing. Well, people are proposing that. Shield us from the sun. So I'm a Gilchrist. That's why I think it's useful. It helps those who want to think about a puzzle, be it climate change or modernity or poverty or flourishing or whatever it is. If it helps get through the barriers that our way of thinking has left us, why not? Wow.
Yeah, and Cheryl, some of our tasks will be, within the academy, and she's working on her PhD in approach to kind of systems leadership as well. So imagine this is, meaningful to your studies as well. But the problem is also within the academy, within like peer review, even within design, if you stray too far outside the kind of known norms of kind of critical science or what's established as, the mode, and I mean by mode what's fashionable, you'll get maybe not rejected, but you'll get reinforced into the direction to kind of toward the mainstream. Paradigms are wickedly difficult to break within publishing and within academic writing. So we have to make bits of arguments here and there that are supported by, look how long that, the Anthony Upward and me article from, over 10 years ago now. It's getting a lot of on the flourishing business ontology, or strongly sustainable business ontology. And it's now like a foundation that is scientifically based. And we made this link with, with John Ehrenfeld's work as a way to kind of bring that paradigm along into work that we thought was very naturally, very grounded in natural science, so that it was inarguable that it fits within the mainstream definitions. So we're trying to break open the paradigm, like as a wedge from within. So the more citations it gets, the more people read it, and the more that influences other kind of new business thinking. We're bringing the possibility of flourishing into changing business models and the definition of what success means in a business as well. And it's slow, but it's got a lot of sites now, and it's so it has, and there's conferences on new business models, but yet what does that do? It creates kind of a new paradigm, right? That is not as big as the existing one. So it does take time, but you just have to be patient to work through the critiques you're going to see when you try to introduce, like even McGilchrist. It will be like, this isn't really scientific. Where's the evidence here? And you're going to have to argue that in the papers.
Yes, it's you pick your advisor very carefully and have him as friend, because it's true what Peter says. One of the problems with this is that McGilchrist is not terribly interested in the practical side. He's a philosopher. His second book is all about philosophy. I'm very disappointed in the second book. The matter with things. He's trying to say that this is a new grounding for philosophy. He just doesn't really. He doesn't want to take on the kind of problems you probably are and I do, and I think it's a shame. But that's him. That's his nature. I pay a lot of money to follow his website, and I've been very disappointed because they just want to play with the ideas, and I see that this is the power of this is using these ideas, and it's challenging, but I hope you'll follow it, because the more people that start to see, and the more time he's cited, the more it's going to be easier for these ideas to begin to filter into practice, and practice is where it counts. That's what Peter does. I'm a theory guy.
I'll just add one thing to this, and that is the interesting thing for me is my brother and I, we don't agree on a lot of things. He's an American capitalist and I'm a Canadian socialist, really. And so, there's a lot that we just don't discuss. But boy, we can talk about Master and his emissary and McGilchrist's theories forever. And, it's been common ground for us. We both kind of revealed that was something we were reading, and we were off, So it's,
but deep down, all of us are, I think, the big question, what's life? Why are we what we are? What's going on? How do I, explain all these things that if you're tuned into the world, this is really a wonderful handbook to help you follow along. So it's not surprising that you find common ground.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. Well, John, thank you for sticking around, for staying with us a little over.
My pleasure, Peter.
There are a few more people still
hanging in,
still kind of in the audience, I think. And just, if anyone has a final question that they want to ask even after that, but otherwise we should probably go pay our respects to the next session.
Okie dokie.
Okay.
Thanks,
everyone. Thank you, John.
See you next year. All right. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.